Welcome to Presence, a global conversation for a new earth.
And hello, everybody, and welcome to Presence. I am Doug King. I'm very excited to be here tonight as part of a Presence announcement, which we see as a big step forward. And I'm very happy to be joined by Dr. Kurt Johnson, longtime friend of ours, and I'll bring Kurt on here momentarily. But let me just quickly say that Kurt is an evolutionary biologist. He's been published in scientific journals over 200 times. He is the author of the book Nabokov's Blues, which in the year 2000, when it was released, was listed as a top 10 book in the field of science by the Washington Post and many other groups as well. As of late, the most recent scientific work that Kurt has done is in a book called Fine Lines, published by the Yale Press. And then Kurt is also very much an expert in the world of comparative religions. He has taught at the One Spirit Interfaith Seminary in fields such as integral consciousness, which you as a Presence audience are well aware of that field and what it consists of. I could say many more things about Kurt. I will only say this in concluding. One of the books that he also wrote in the comparative religion world is a book called The Coming Interspiritual Age. I have recommended that book in other podcasts if you have listened to. And that book was what spurred me to get on the phone and call Kurt immediately in New York, only to find that he was getting ready to go to a meeting in Colorado. And it so happened that Danae and I were still at that time living in Colorado Springs. And Kurt was kind enough to come and spend a couple days and a night with us and has been just a great friend to me and Danae ever since. And Kurt and I have gone down many roads. So with that, Kurt, thanks so much for joining me for this announcement tonight. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, Doug, thank you so much. And so I guess my first question to you, does it fall on you to make the announcement or me to make the announcement? Or how do you want to handle that?
So I'll lead it off by simply saying this, and I mentioned it briefly in the newsletter, that Presence has been invited to join a group called Evolutionary Leaders, which is part of the Source of Synergy Foundation. And Kurt, you can talk more about that in detail. And the beauty of all this is that it's going to give us an opportunity to greatly expand our message as we see this global conversation for a new earth where the God we see is all in all, not all in some. So Kurt, if you could explain the background of what brought Evolutionary Leaders into being and why we were invited to participate.
Yeah, absolutely. So actually the Evolutionary Leaders, which you can find at evolutionaryleaders.net, was founded well over a decade ago by a number of luminaries whose names you will recognize right away: Deepak Chopra, Gene Houston, Irvin Laszlo, Maryanne Williamson, the list goes on and on. Back when the incipient realization came that people who were already reaching that level of developmental consciousness and understanding that characterizes the whole Presence community, that it was really the time for those people to gather in as big and effective a way as possible and start to promulgate that message. And so that organization then has grown over that 10 years now to nearly 300 members. And if you add in then our publicly engaged synergy circles, another 200 members, which is nearly 500 members. And what's interesting about it is it's really invitation only. So those people who are invited to be a part of the Evolutionary Leaders Circle, that's not done just to be an exclusive club or group, but it's actually to create the quality control of the vision and the constituencies that we're able to reach out to as a collective so that we can really, really be effective. And we had then gone through a period as COVID came in that we really needed, as we're expecting post-COVID now, to actually grow in a big way. So we actually did a major reassessment of the voices that we wanted to invite into the Evolutionary Leaders Circle, particularly as we were starting to engage across the whole landscape of thematic areas of activism, which I'll also mention. And so in that process, which was a nominating process that went through most of 2021, we really made a list of people who we thought and groups that we thought were absolutely essential to building out this vision and building it out collectively with all of the fellow travelers who are really in that second tier consciousness and in that integral developmental level, which is all about the we and understanding the me within the we and building the world we want to see that's beyond ego and that's based on the good of the whole. And science is understanding now that evolution itself is trying to drive toward a global altruism and a global goodness. So on that list was Presence and Doug King as the CEO of Presence, because we had known Doug for a lot of years. We've been friends for years, and it was just the right time, both for the ELs and we think also for the Presence community to join this global conversation. And if you also check out at the Evolutionary Leaders website, which I just mentioned, evolutionaryleaders.net, and if you go to activities in the drop-down menu, you'll see synergy circles. What we decided to do in the last few years to really build our engagement based on all of these big names that you'll see who are a part of the organization, you're going to actually recognize 90% of the people in the who we are list in the pictures. You're going to say, those are the people on my bookshelf. That's actually one of the common comments about the ELs.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's my bookshelf. And that's one reason that we're a very effective group, because we have a very large constituency. But we had actually designated more than a dozen areas of engagement, and I'll just list a few of those. So the relation of science and spirituality, the future of an ecological civilization, what education in 2022 and beyond means at all levels. Consider that in what you already know of integral and spiral dynamics. Bridging the consciousness divide between worldviews and also political divides, bridging that. Building the holo movement, building the movement that actually builds out second tier consciousness at a global level. Conscious business. And then the one that we're so excited about and having Doug and Presence involved is integral and holistic cosmologies. And I'll say why in a minute, but just going through the rest of that list. Media, international organizations, and the relationship of all of that to peace and stability and sustainability. So where we were so excited, and Doug's already involved in this process, is in the expression of this unitive new narrative based on the integral and holistic worldviews that actually are the umbrella and the invitation to buy into playing together about this crucial message. I mean, I think you all know tonight we're recording this on February 23rd, and tonight probably the tanks are going to start rolling in Ukraine. They've just closed down the airspace. They've declared a national emergency. And to think that that is going on and the carnage that will bring inevitably, when we're talking about a world that could be so full of abundance and so full of care about everyone, and the entire worldview that Presence has been about for so many years, it just creates this stark realization of what our mandate is. So in that context, then, I just want to, on behalf of the Evolutionary Leaders, to welcome Presence and to welcome Doug and Danae and the whole Presence family, because this is going to be something really pertinent and pivotal that we can all do together. So maybe that's a bit of a long introduction, but I think it kind of sets the stage for what's really exciting for you and for us.
No, that's beautiful. And that's exactly what we're trying to get out here to our Presence audience tonight. It's built over probably the last decade since you and I first met, Kurt. And there have been a lot of roads that you and I have gone down together. I thought today about all the different things that happened after you came to Colorado Springs. We got an invitation to Cascadia for a big interspiritual meeting where I met a number of people, then many of them involved in Evolutionary Leaders now. And then from there, I got through you an invitation to come up to One Spirit to meet Diane Burke, the director of that effort, who at that time had Adam Bucko and Rory McEntee there, who had just released the book New Monasticism. And I had an opportunity to do an interview with them. Through you, I met Ken Kitatani, who has done a lot of work with the UN, Rick Clugston. You guys have all been down here to Atlanta. And then through that group, there was a heavy connection to the UN that you've always had. And so you got me on a panel, and I got to go to the UN. And I sat on a panel with you and Ken and I had a few other people there, Rick. And so in that, one thing that really moved me and that I really want to express gratitude, and our presence audience is going to really appreciate this, Kurt. When Kurt was up speaking, he mentioned Max King. And I got to tell you, that was a moment that still hits me, because everybody in presence knows that my dad is absolutely the other side of the coin to whatever you would term a self-promoter. And my dad, because he resisted and worked in a field and proposed new paradigms that were not yet ready to be embraced, worked in obscurity for most of his life in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And I know Mom and Dad are watching these videos, but here he is after all that. And I just want to express such gratitude, because Kurt mentioned Max King, even mentioned looking him up on Wikipedia. And I thought, here I am sitting in the United Nations building in New York City. And my dad, who has shunned any and every attempt to have any kind of self-promotion, gets mentioned in this setting. And I also want to say that all these things I've done with you, Kurt, and all the things and people that I've met and what was given to me by my dad's work is just a sign of evolution. It's the way evolution works. Every single one of us is a product of the things that we've been given. And so to take any pride in that, the only pride I have is that I was smart enough to sit there and listen to a lot of people who had a lot of great ideas and continue to do so. So we have been down many roads. And what I like about this, Kurt, is what you were saying about the different fields of study. I mean, we've got people out here in the presence audience, and they are in all these fields. For example, there's a new group for musicians. I believe it's going to be called ACE. They're looking to form that now. So you've got everything from scientists all the way to artists.
Yeah, really,
and everything
really
in between.
Well-known people and well-positioned people. And that's why if we can work together now as a collective, you got to think of it as a team. And we're fielding a team with quality players at every position and constituencies that build out from them. And that's why if we can use that skillfully, we really believe we can make a difference. One of the comments I was going to make from your comments, because it's always so dear to me, is that, and this will give some perspective also to the Presence family, is really Doug's and my friendship has really spanned the growth of the whole interspiritual movement as it grew from the interfaith movement, as it dropped from the head to the heart, where interfaith was pretty much, can we get along in our ideas? Interspirituality was understanding the oneness and the interconnection, where at all levels, from science to mysticism, it's really the same. And what's interesting, in that 10 or more years, interspirituality has gone from being new news, where we had to explain it to everybody, to thankfully being old news. There's nowhere you go today that people don't understand the reality and the necessity of this interlacing and the interdigitation of global worldviews of all kinds, and how we're just at the threshold now of building the integral collective global worldview in which all of those find their place. So some of us, if we talk back from, again, speaking of Colorado, working with Father Keating and the 30-year Snowmass dialogue, which resulted then in the 9 points of agreement among the world's religions that were published in the Carmen Heart in 2007, which involved Father Keating and the Dalai Lama and Ken Wilber and all these other leaders, and then leading then to Wayne Teasdale's 9 elements of the universal spirituality, where he basically asked, well, if the theologies, if the religions agree on these 9 points, then what would our behavior have to look like? And so then Wayne Teasdale, came with the nine behavioral ways that we would be acting if we were at this developmental level. So the other anecdote I wanted to share, because I actually mention it a lot when I'm, giving speeches and other things like that, is that the other thing we did in Colorado was we went up to meet Ken Wilber and to have Doug introduced to Ken Wilber. And that was just on the cusp of when Presence was acquiring or considering acquiring the Atlanta location. And it was really important to Doug, because he was so savvy himself in integral and spiral dynamics, that he would, in that sense, get Ken Wilber's blessing for this whole new venture that Presence was going into. So when we went to Denver and we were in Ken Wilber's loft, and I've gotten to spend many times there since, but the time that Doug was with us, we actually spent quite a few hours talking about how Doug and Presence had arrived at the integral second tier consciousness understanding. And actually the conversation reverted back to Max. And Doug pointed out that Max had figured this out early on. And the whole beginning, like if you go to Wikipedia and it says that Max is the founder of postmillennialism, that's the term that they use. But the universal view of the Christ, the universal understanding of the Christian message, so that it's beyond the ticket to heaven, but it's about how all of the religions are about true awakening, true full development of self, full moral maturity, everything we talk about in our full moral capacity as human beings. And so Ken Wilber actually asked Doug, how did your father answer the question of how he could figure that out so ahead of his time? And this is one I always quote in so many speeches, is Doug said, my father said, that's what I saw in the scriptures. Remember when he said that?
Yes.
And then what Ken Wilber said was, absolutely, if you were reading the scriptures from second tier consciousness, that's what you would see. If you were reading them from the old first tier consciousness, you'd still see this world.
Yes.
So that was a moment I felt was just priceless.
Yes, absolutely. And what's really exciting to me is that you and I, along with Dr. Bob Atkinson, Dr. Jude Currivan, who is a physicist and mathematician. She is a UK lady, a graduate of Oxford, as well as Ken Wilber, are on the liaison team, I think is the technical term, meaning that we talk together about the meetings, conferences, and the different manifestations that we want to see coming from this synergy circle. And that's so exciting to me. I'm reading Jude Currivan's book now on the cosmic hologram. I'll be podcasting on that pretty soon, so everybody at Presence can stay tuned on that. The quantum world and spirituality. This book is just fantastic. As a matter of fact, as I get to know Jude better, one of these days I'll twist her arm to be on some videos with me, because she's got some brilliant stuff. But Kurt, this is so exciting, this group we have in integral and holistic cosmologies.
Yeah, and I was just going to mention to you when we were prepping for this before that, I don't know if you've seen, but they've just announced now an accredited PhD program in California on integral theory and integral studies. So that is a huge step, because, we see everywhere now, David Sloan Wilson and I, again, so the Presence will know that David Sloan Wilson's the other really famous evolutionary biologist who was invited by the Dalai Lama to talk about this. And David and I went and stayed at the Dalai Lama's residence, it'll be 2 falls ago now, really updating the Dalai Lama now about how science and spirituality were on the same track, because the message of the wisdom traditions, which would be a world that's built on the heart, now has been shown by what's called in science group selection and multi-level selection, which always choose for the good of the whole. Individuals make selfish choices, but groups make choices for the good of the whole. And one reason that nature is so balanced is because it's been able to evolve unimpeded toward that taking care of the whole, really altruism in nature. And so what science now realizes at the deepest levels of the mainstream is that if we weren't standing in the way in our first tier old paradigm thinking, then actually evolution would want to drive our species toward a planetary altruism and toward goodness and everything that means at a planetary level. So we actually, a big part of our message is, let's, as David Sloan Wilson says, let's get in the driver's seat of our cultural evolution. We have the choice to drive it off the cliff of division and separation and conflict, or we've got the steering wheel to drive it toward where the heart and the millennial traditions have told us for millennia that the vision would be based on the good of the whole and the heart, and mutuality, reciprocity, love, kindness, compassion, go through the whole list. That's actually our destiny, but we're in this log jam where our other worldviews stand in the way. And, all of I mean, that's why you landed in presence. You've landed in presence because that's where it's landed, in that second tier consciousness, which is about the good of the whole and understanding the really skillful relationship of me and we. So that's the future, and you're a part of that, and that's exciting. So one of the things that Doug's been a part of is that we've been drafting what we call a unitive new narrative statement, which really encapsulates how the great wisdom traditions, integral, the perennial philosophies, and science would see this unified cosmology that we're a part of. And much to our delight, everybody that we've showed that to within our own circles and others, they've said, oh my gosh, that's exactly where I land. That's exactly where I've landed in my spiritual development and therefore in my hope for the planet. So that's been great, because that's the umbrella under which then all of these areas of engagement can really be coming from the same place and not just scattering out into, all kinds of, different directions. So I want to thank Doug for he stepped up right away. He was actually the spokesman for that circle when we had a community call of a bunch of us from the ELs on February 15th about this ongoing vision. So Doug is already in there swinging fully with both hands, but not in that negative way.
Well, and again, I just think about, again, all these invitations you're talking about. David Sloan Wilson, who's one of the foremost evolutionary biologists and authors out there. And thanks to you, he agreed to have an audience where you and I jumped in a rental car. I think we had Ken Kitatani with us.
That's
and
right.
We drove like a couple of hours toward the Catskills, because David Sloan Wilson likes to trout fish, and he was on his way to go fishing. And we met this little cafe out in the middle of the mountains, and we're sitting there in this little cafe having this discussion. And I'm wondering, looking around at the people in the cafe, and I'm wondering, we were like aliens, I think, just sitting there having this conversation. But again, this ability for presence to expand into the global conversation that says, look, the cosmology of God was in the beginning. You have a physiosphere, you have a biosphere, you have the human who then is breathed in with a noosphere, and we sit positioned as connected to all that has preceded us and co-creators of all that's ahead of us. And so these conversations, again, I'm just so grateful that Presence has been able to be in. And I know that the people watching this video and listening are excited, because here's the other thing we want to do. And I'll say this for our Presence audience. I have returned several emails of late about virtual communities ourselves, and the fact that because there are so few people that have just entered into the second tier way of seeing and the lenses of second tier, we're spread all over the place. You can't say, hey, there's a there's a group down on the corner a couple of blocks from you where there's going to be 500 or 1,000 people that meet every week and have this discussion. That's what we're headed toward. That day will come. We'll move from total resistance to that infamous place where it's self-evident, but that's a journey to get there. So we're working on ways that we can make these things available. I want to be able to communicate what's happening with all these different synergy groups. I want to bring in their books. I want to bring in their podcasts. And I want to connect the way we are seeing the biblical narrative as a narrative of two cosmologies, just as science sees a Newtonian and a quantum. So also we're seeing a first and second tier and seeing the similarities of the way all of this is manifested from one single source. So very excited about that. And Kurt, I really appreciate you taking a minute to just introduce this. That's all we wanted to do tonight, was introduce it. Thank you for this, for being behind so many of the things that we have been able to do. And you and I will probably be back on some videos, I hope, as more things get published and we have more things to talk about.
Yeah, and just let me mention one other thing about where presence will be so at home in this conversation and at home with the cutting edge of modern science. And it goes to Teilhard de Chardin, who you mentioned. And that's a cornerstone of Presence's vision, certainly a cornerstone of all transformational religion that understands an evolutionary perspective. But it's also now the mainstream of conventional science. It's good that people are aware that David Sloan Wilson's most recent book, subtitled Completing the Darwinian Revolution, is actually a restatement to the scientific community of Teilhard's cosmology. And what David says to the scientific community is, let's not worry about Teilhard's theology. Theology are these other ideas and symbol types of that. But his cosmology is the cosmology we want, because it's the one in which we're in the driver's seat of our own evolution, propelling ourselves in the direction of the values and the depth of ideals that we know could be built, into a human civilization. And that's a bottom line that we're just all, so deeply sharing now. And I'm trying to remember when we met David at that cafe, how close that was to 2016. It might have been around that time, because that's just in the period where they had just published the results of group and multi-level selection, which showed that evolution was moving in this other direction toward goodness. And David at that time, why was he willing to drive that far? He was trying to find, who are my allies who understand the implications of this? And the reason I mentioned it is then in 2016 is when E.O. Wilson, who everybody knows, probably the most famous scientist for years and years and years at Harvard. So E.O. Wilson then joined with David Sloan Wilson in rewriting sociobiology, which is the biology of social organisms, and we are one of those, to understand this cooperative and altruistic understanding of evolution. So when we first were talking to David, it was just coming over the top of the hill. And now, just like inner spirituality and the understanding of integral and second tier consciousness is over the hill and really into many, many people's consciousness, the same way now with mainstream science. And this brought the smiles to the Dalai Lama when we were in Dharamshala 2 years ago, because he really could see finally now that we're all on the same path of understanding this shared destiny. And my final note, it's the sale point for Presence. If anybody wants to know about what that vision is, go to presence.tv and just read all the materials on the conversation for a new earth. And there's the vision that we're a part of as well. So congratulations on the decades of work that Doug and the whole Presence community have done to develop that incredible flagship of second tier consciousness.
Thank you so much, Kurt. I really appreciate your time, which is extremely difficult to get because there are only a couple hundred people pulling on Kurt all at one time. So thanks for coming in. It's always good to see you. And that will be our message for tonight. And we will have much more to continue on. So thanks for joining us, and we will be back in touch soon. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. If you have any questions or comments, please contact us at info@presence.tv. You can also visit our website at presence.tv or find us on Facebook. We look forward to hearing from you.